And I can crop it later. I'll crop it. Okay, so that was a good explanation of PCBs, and you explained why. Okay, so GE used them obviously in their transformers
Yeah, not
here.
just GE, but yeah.
Okay, can you talk?
All companies, so like Monsanto was using them originally to make these compounds for transformers. So GE happened to be a company that builds transformers, so they don't make PCBs. They used PCBs in the production of their transformers. So they're kind of like the middleman. They didn't make the PCBs, but then they would use them as their transformer kind of solvent.
Where did GE get the PCBs?
Monsanto was a big company, which Monsanto is kind of a fairly famous company in the U.S., and that does a lot of work in these kind of similar compounds, because PCBs is kind of the same vein as like DDT and some of the other chlorinated pesticides, and so it's a similar synthesis to make all of them, and they do different jobs depending on what the original structure is, but the chlorines around it, which is why PCBs has a similar pesticide effect like DDT, and that it kills off the insects in a similar manner, and that it disrupts the ion channels from working correctly. So PCBs are not designed to be pesticides, but they can be used as a pesticide if needed. But it's better to use them for transformers.
And so where was Monsanto manufacturing the PCBs that showed up here in Rome?
That's a good question. I don't know for sure where they would have purchased them. I mean, Monsanto has lots of different locations. My best guess would that it'd be on the East Coast, but I would have to.
I was thinking Anniston, Alabama.
Could have been there too. Yes.
Obviously Anniston, Alabama has had
Yeah.
major issues with contamination, and it became a Superfund site. And we heard from another participant in the film that they were shipped over from Anniston.
Oh, well then that would be the better answer then.
I wanted just to corroborate, because I don't have formal documentation as to where they came from.
I don't know for sure which plant would have manufactured them, because multiple plants make them and then ship them around the U.S.
Okay.
So.
And so you just answered it, but so the termite control, the reason why employees were bringing it home was because they knew that it would be useful in that regard?
Right, and so it works similarly to like other pesticides of a similar vein. DDT is the most famous one that looks like that. But yeah, employees would take it home because they saw at the plant that it was an effective termite killer, fire ant killer, and so they would take home some occasionally and just put it around the perimeter of their house, because again, without lots of documentation, we didn't know then what we know now, that it has been linked to cancer and that it does bioaccumulate across the environmental system. So it's not a great idea to put it in place where it's not found normally.
Okay, so that jumped into some of these other things. What I'm really interested in from your perspective is, like, once they get into the environment, how do they persist?
So PCBs are the category of POPs, persistent organic pesticides, that were outlawed by the Stockholm Convention in the late 90s, early 2000s era. So since they are non-volatile and they're not water soluble, they stick to the soil, and they will stay in the soil. And so for some areas that the PCBs have gotten into the water system, they're actually on the bottom of the rivers and on the edges. And so it is fine to leave them there. The issue comes up when we start dredging and trying to fix the problem actually makes it worse, as we saw like in the Hudson River. Then in some ways it would have been better just to be left alone, because it would have just been covered up by moist soil and been fine. But by dredging it up, you're actually kicking up those PCBs back up to the water system to be eaten by the small animals and bioaccumulate up to the fish that then people are eating. So you'll find PCBs typically attached to soil particles rather than in water or in the air. They never show up in the air, usually just soil, occasionally water.
So what I've heard is there were like stock cars and stuff like that on G's property that they would drain, that they would release the PCBs, or they would dispose of them on their property.
Right.
And so there's various, small creeks and such that would the PCBs sink down? How would they move from that GE
so
property?
PCBs hate being in water. They're very nonpolar. And so they're going to do their darndest to get out of the water. And so the best place for them then is going to be the soil. And so they are going to sink to the soil, and then once they find the soil, they're going to attach to it fairly strongly. And then they're not going to move. So unless the soil gets moved, the PCB is attached to the soil, and the soil is just going to sit there on the bottom and get covered up by other things. The issue comes up when you start trying to remediate that soil by digging it back up. You then can release the PCBs back off the soil, back into the water, and have them transport farther, or somehow end up in the food stream by making them available for small animals to eat.
How would a small animal eat PCB?
Just in that it's in the water, right? So the krill or whatever, I don't know biology very well. Very small animals, whatever is smaller than a fish that would be eating or drinking the water could ingest the PCBs that then would attach to their body. Then they get eaten by something bigger and it accumulates that fat.
What do they attach to in an organism's body?
Well, so they don't like water, so they're fat soluble. So they will hang out in the fat stores of the animal. When they hang out in the fat stores, they do disrupt the ion channels. So they prevent the ion channels from closing properly. So if you're a very small animal, like a termite or a fire ant, it sends your body into kind of spasms. And so they can't control their motor system. And so they eventually just starve because they can't motor themselves anywhere. And a larger animal, it's more like the mercury issues you see in tuna, and that doesn't hurt the tuna to have the mercury in its body. It hurts the larger animals that then eat the tuna on a large scale. So PCBs hanging out in the fat stores of fish is not a big deal unless you're eating a lot of fish with PCBs in them, in which case you will start seeing some of the effects, some of these similar motor issues that if you had a high diet in PCB intoxicated fish.
What about people playing in those streams around GE?
In theory, that should be fine, because unless they are somehow drinking the water or they have open wounds and they're getting the water into it, PCBs can't go across your skin barrier. So you should be fine, as long as the bigger issue is that they are kicking up the PCBs out of the dirt probably and then making them available to the smaller animals. So I'd be more concerned about people who maybe would be eating fish out of those waterways. And again, the occasional fish is fine. If for some reason they're eating a full diet of fish from the waterways, then they would have some issues.
We've got stories of, people who as children have played in the right around Garden Lakes and grew up playing in those streams, and obviously children would have skinned up knees and they would, so is that of concern?
I mean, probably not. I mean, I think how much water is probably getting into the skinned up knees is very, very small. I think if they were constantly exposed, it'd be a longer lasting issue. I mean, anytime you try and track a cancer issue back to a point source, it's almost impossible because there's so many variables. I think it probably didn't help if they played in those water streams, but I can't say for sure it'd be causational.
What else besides cancer should people be concerned about in terms of exposure to PCBs or consumption?
I think the main things besides possible link to cancer would be any sort of, if they are small children, it could be linked to learning delays or some motor function issues. If you're pregnant, it is possible that you would have some fetal issues that then would have similar, potentially like premature birth or learning delays again. So it's similar in a lot of the other environmental effects that you see from things like DDT.
I didn't put this on the list, but I'm curious, could it be connected to brain aneurysms?
I think that'd be hard to prove.
Okay.
So I can't say no, but I wouldn't want to say yes definitively.
A couple people I've chatted with that grew up in Garden Lakes. One woman's mom died of a brain aneurysm at a young age, and several other women on that street, all of whom were GE. Their husbands were GE employees and brought home this stuff and put it in
interesting.
there. I know. You all right?
Yeah, I'm going to get a cough drop.
Go for it.
The excitement about chatting about it.
I know this is sensitive stuff. I appreciate you participating.
Okay.
So you don't know about the lock and dam stuff. Was that one of the ones you didn't want to?
No, I don't know that one.
That's so interesting. So that splost passed.
Yeah.
And the whole city was all excited. They had a big party. They were gonna redo the downtown and have it set up for big ol', you know,
Yeah.
the Roman, what's it
Holiday
called?
thing.
The Roman
Yeah,
holiday. And they would have more of those boats.